In Venezuela, the extreme right wing manipulates the speech of the candidate for the great patriotic poll, Nicolas Maduro, when he warned about destabilizing plans to not recognize the electoral results. In Palestine, the UNRWA denounces that Israeli genocidal forces have destroyed 70% of schools in Gaza. And the Haitian government declares a state of security emergency in 14 municipalities controlled by criminal gangs. Hello and welcome to From the South. I'm Alejandra Garcia from teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In Venezuela, the extreme right wing manipulates the speech of the candidate for the great patriotic poll, Nicolas Maduro, when he warned about destabilizing plans to not recognize the electoral results. Through social networks, extremist sectors and several media outlets have distorted what Nicolas Maduro said when he warned about the possibility of a bloodbath in Venezuela if the extreme right does not win the elections. What was expressed by the candidate evidenced the destabilizing and discriminatory plans of the fascist sectors, which also seek to prevent a victory of the candidate for the great patriotic poll. He also stressed the importance of these elections for the destiny of the country, which will depend on his victory to avoid a confrontation.
The more resounding the victory, the more guarantees for peace we are going to have. The more convincing the votes, the more guarantee of future we are going to give to these children. The destiny of Venezuela in the 21st century depends on our victory on July 28th. If they don't want Venezuela to fall into a bloodbath, into a civil and fratricide war caused by the fascists, let us achieve the greatest success, the greatest victory in the electoral history of our people.
Meanwhile, the head of the Venezuela Nuestra campaign command, Jorge Rodriguez, denounced that the spokesmen of the Venezuelan extreme right and their international allies are inciting hatred through posts in social networks.
A few days ago, spokesmen of international fascism and the Venezuelan extreme right began to publish posts that were nothing more than a message to trigger the awakening of the fascist and violent desires of a sector of the Venezuelan population. Because that is where they start. They start with insults, and then they end up with violence with a guarimba, or burning people alive, like they did with a young boy from Altamira, or putting guayas to slit the throats of motorcyclists. That's why today, 20,000 motorcyclists came out to tell him how they are fighting the battle here in Caracas. But look how those pseudo-journalists of fascism are publishing tweets saying that our women were apes, that the Chavistas were apes. We are all apes and apes, saying that we are fat, that we are ugly, that we had to be exterminated, that an extermination had to be done, and that kind of things that their spokesman started to publish. A certain Andres Estrada a week ago, he is the greatest ape and met in Petare with his army of fat apes. And he said, I thought that one of these serious men would do the job. A single shot would solve that. Now we are going to have to wait for July 29th to do the job ourselves, inciting and calling for the assassination of the President of the Republic, Nicolas Maduro.
Chavista forces in Venezuela mobilized in support of presidential candidate Nicolas Maduro as part of the presidential campaign. The main streets of the city of Valera in Trujillo State were filled by thousands of supporters of the presidential candidate for the great patriotic poll, Nicolas Maduro. The first vice president of the PSUV, Diosdado Cabello, assured that President Maduro will achieve a great resounding victory. In this context, during his speech, Cabello also affirmed that the Venezuelan people achieved peace led by the candidate Maduro.
We all have to respect each other. If you are a Christian, we respect you. If you are a Catholic, we respect you. If you don't believe in anyone, we respect you. If you believe in a saint, we respect you. Venezuela has achieved these levels of tranquility and stability. And I am going to say it, thanks to the efforts of brother President Nicolas Maduro.
Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and more. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. The Haitian government declares a state of security emergency in 14 municipalities controlled by criminal gangs. The nation's interim Prime Minister, Gazan, informed that the decision seeks to diminish the impact of criminal action on Haitian families. He reaffirmed the country's security as a priority and will spare no efforts to combat gangs and establish order. Moreover, he urged the gang members to recognize the authority of the state and to establish a dialogue. The President of Mexico, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, suggested the integral renovation of international organizations in order to act efficiently in the face of geopolitical conflicts. The head of state emphasized that the United Nations organization must renew itself and participate in a more proactive way and avoid political disputes and confrontations. He also criticized the right of veto of some members of the United Nations, which does not allow the solution of many of the world problems. Moreover, the head of state called on the Organization of American States to reinvent itself and avoid violence. López Obrador pronounced himself in favor of the universal fraternity that would be applied as a diplomatic measure.
If there has to be a renewal in international politics,
los organismos internacionales se tienen que reformar. Desde luego la OEA.
The international organizations have to reaffirm themselves. Of course, the OAS and the UN.
Es importantísimo que la ONU se active, permanece.
It is very important that the UN gets active. It remains very idle.
Inactiva, solo actuando.
Only acting formally without really playing an important role.
Sin tener realmente un papel importante, protagónico.
A leading role to prevent conflicts, inequality, and violence.
En evitar que haya tanta desigualdad, en evitar la violencia, no está a la par.
It is not keeping up with what is happening in the world. The UN has been lagging behind.
En el mundo. Se ha quedado rezagada la ONU, está en la retaguardia.
And when it acts, it is because conflicts have already broken out.
The Mexican president also stressed that the United Nations functions as a bureaucratic body that does not provide tangible solutions.
We need to change the veto system. It's not possible that the UN Security Council be run by only 5 nations and that no agreement can be reached openly. Where all countries participate with their representations. Because if one of the 5 vetoes, no one can do anything. Then the UN is turned into nothing, into a flower vase, into a decoration. And it's also an onerous bureaucratic apparatus because it costs a lot to maintain this organization.
organización tienen
They have offices for everything but without any result.
pero no hay resultados.
The UNRWA denounces that Israeli genocidal forces have destroyed 70% of schools in Gaza Strip. On this regard, UNRWA Commissioner General Philippe Lazzarini noted in social platform X that these have become usual incidents and at least 8 schools have been hit in the last 10 days, including 6 UNRWA schools. Lazzarini added that the war has deprived Gazan children of their childhood and education, as the schools must never be used for military or combat purposes by any of the conflict sides. The Palestinian Food Distribution Program announced a cut in the food ration provided by the United Nations due to the massive displacement in the Gaza Strip. The most recent report of the United Nations organization points out that 9 out of 10 Palestinians move to the refugee camps at least once a month after being evicted by the occupying forces. On the other hand, the workers reduce their food consumption to guarantee the supply to the new refugees. We have a final short break coming up, but before we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience. You can scan the QR code on screen to join directly and share the link to reach more people. Constant news coverage of Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as the rest of the world. Final short break, don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. On Wednesday in the United States, hundreds of Disney employees manifested in front of the company's theme parks in California to demand fair wages and safe working conditions and to denounce the organization's anti-union practices. The protest was organized by unions representing some 14,000 Disneyland workers, following the lack of progress in the negotiations being held since April between Disney and 4 Californian unions. As the dialogue fails to, and instead workers have been increasingly intimidated, as the company has accused of using intimidation and surveillance tactics towards its workers, with more than 500 employees being allegedly unlawfully disciplined by violating the company's dress code. In this context, employees will vote on Friday to authorize a strike. If the action gets approved, unions will proceed to decide on its terms and duration.
Setting to me. It's personal to me because last summer I was working here full time and I had other employment and I was still living in my car. I had to come into the resort to shower and use the restrooms here, and nobody should ever have to experience that working a full-time job.
You know what? None of us want to strike. That's the first and foremost. We want the contracts to be fair for everybody, Disney and cast members alike. If we got to go to strike, then that's what we got to do. But all the cast members, we want a fair contract for everyone.
Foreign Minister of Russia Sergei Lavrov granted that Moscow is ready to hold negotiation talks on Ukraine and on security in Europe. On a press briefing held shortly after a meeting with the members of the Security Council, Lavrov assured that he hopes that at some point a treaty on European security will be reached, and in this context the Ukrainian crisis will be solved. The foreign minister further stressed the need to stop the delivery of arms to Ukraine and to seek a solution that would compel to be aware of the realities on the ground and in public life. According to Lavrov, the West chose to boost the so-called peace plan of the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, which is a pronounced form of ultimatum.
There has been talk of such a second briefing. Not only Switzerland was mentioned, but also other countries that could become a platform for this second round of the conference. But talking about what they'll do, they all in one way or another formulated an absolutely one-sided approach, absolutely unacceptable to us and to many others sincerely interested in peace.
The Paris 2024 Olympic flame continues the 59th leg of its journey through the streets of France, this time in the northern department of Aisne.
With just 9 days to go until the opening of the Games, the Olympic flame is entering the final days of its relay. In the capital Paris, the commune of Château-Thierry was on Tuesday the starting point for the 59th leg of the 12,000-kilometer journey across France. Meanwhile, in Aisne, the symbolic fire was once again greeted with a popular celebration in several of the department's landmarks, followed by the lighting of the cauldron in Saint-Quentin.
On the other hand, 8 days before the opening ceremony of the France 2024 Games, delegations from the United States, Japan, South Africa and Uruguay are among the first who arrived at the Olympic Village. Precisely about 10,500 athletes from 206 countries will participate over 19 days, competing in 32 sports with a total of 329 gold medals up for grabs. In the meantime, some of the athletes spoke about the weather, their personal goals, and the competition in general. We have come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net and join us on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram and TikTok as well. For Telesur English, I'm Alejandra Garcia. Thank you for watching.